Why would someone with a medical degree suddenly decide to study business straight after medical school? And more importantly, did it actually work? So I spent 6 years training to become a medical doctor in Jamaica. Medicine was always the path that I was expected to take. My whole family are doctors, and by the time I finished medical school, the next step seemed obvious: continue the clinical route. But instead of staying in medicine, I did something that surprised a lot of people. I moved to the UK to do a master's in management. But over the past few years, I've transitioned into the business side of healthcare. That path eventually led me to be admitted to the London Business School MBA program. So if you're new here, hi, my name is Makti. I originally trained as a medical doctor and grew up in Kingston, Jamaica. In this video, I want to walk you through 3 things. First, why I decided to leave clinical medicine in the first place. 2, why I chose a master's in management instead of something like an MBA or a public health master's. And third, the most important question, was the degree actually worth it? Now let's start with why I began looking for a non-clinical path in the first place. Chapter 1, why I wanted to go non-clinical. So to understand why I ended up doing a master's in management, you first have to understand the situation I was in at the time. Because medicine wasn't just a random career choice for me. I grew up in a family of doctors. Both my parents are doctors, my grandparents, and both my siblings all went into medicine. So from a pretty early age, that path was already kind of laid out for me. I was to study hard, get into medical school, become a doctor. And for a really long time, I didn't really question this. I went through medical school, finished the degree, and started preparing for the next usual steps, working in the hospital and continuing on that clinical route. But during my final year of medical school, 2 things happened that really made me start to rethink this path. So the first was sport, and the sport of badminton. So throughout medical school, I had always played badminton competitively, and during my final year, I started a small coaching business on the side. At first, it was something I just did for fun, but surprisingly, the business actually started to do pretty well. I was running coaching sessions, organizing training, and it was actually bringing in some serious income while I was still a student. And this for me was the first time I actually started experiencing something different from the hospital environment. I was actually building something. I was thinking about how to attract students, how to organize sessions, how to actually grow the program. And this for me was the first time I really experienced the business side of anything. And it was sort of my first real source of income. But the second thing that happened during my final year was much more serious. Around that same time, I started to have pretty severe stomach symptoms. And it got so bad that even after I graduated, I actually had to delay starting my medical internship. So I spent around 6 months trying to figure out what was going on with my health. And during that period, for the first time in years, everything sort of slowed down. I wasn't rushing to the wards on the hospital. I wasn't studying every day for exams. I suddenly had time to think. And when you spend your whole life moving along one singular path, having that kind of pause forces you to think about the uncomfortable questions. So I was wondering, was medicine actually what I wanted to do long term? Or was it something that I was just following along the path of? And at the same time, I had this badminton business going on the side. And I started to see the world outside of clinical medicine. And sort of at that time was when the idea of doing something different started to really appear. I began looking at ways where I can move into something more business focused while still keeping a connection to healthcare. And that's sort of where the idea first came up of me doing a master's in management. Chapter 2, where and why I chose a master's in management. So after that period where I had time to step back and really rethink things, the next question I had was pretty practical. If I didn't want to stay into traditional clinical medicine, what could I do instead? At that point, I had only worked in a hospital for a short time. So I started to look at degrees that could help me move into something more non-clinical. And sort of the most obvious options that came up were things like a master's in public health, an MBA, or some kind of business related degree. And to be honest, at this time, being a doctor was my whole world. Anything to do with a degree outside of medicine or business was really new to me. Medical training is usually very structured. You follow a clear path from medical school and into hospital trainings. But when you kind of step out of that bubble, suddenly there are dozens of different options and it's not always obvious what each degree is designed for. So I was really confused. And at this time is sort of where I came across something called a Master's in Management, or they call it the MIM. And just quickly, if you're not familiar with it, a Master's in Management is basically a business degree designed for people early in their careers. And unlike an MBA, which usually requires several years of work experience, the MIM is aimed at recent graduates or professionals who are just starting to explore the business world. So for someone like me, I thought it made a lot of sense. I didn't have a lot of corporate experience, and the course was broad enough to teach things like strategy, marketing, business fundamentals, but it didn't require a lot of years of experience before applying. So yes, the MIM started to look like a really interesting bridge between medicine and business. And then once I decided that was the direction I wanted to explore, the next decision was, which university do I pick to study? And I think this is where my situation became even more unique, because up until that point in my life, I had always played badminton at a competitive level, even throughout medical school. And this was just the time coming up to qualify for badminton at the Commonwealth Games. So when I started to look at universities, one place really stood out for me, and this was Loughborough University. And if you didn't know, Loughborough is widely considered one of the best sporting universities in the entire world. They had Olympic level training facilities, world-class coaches, and a huge culture around sport and your degree. So in my mind, it seemed like the perfect combination for me. I could pursue a Master's in Management to explore the business world while also continuing to train seriously in badminton. And that ultimately was how I ended up moving to the UK to start that degree. But of course, the real question is, what happened after that? Did the degree actually open the doors that I was hoping for? And looking back now, there are definitely some things that went really well. But there were a few things that I would probably do differently. Chapter 3. Was the Master's in Management worth it? So when I look back, I know the question that everyone has is, was the Master's in Management actually worth it? And the short answer for this is definitely yes. It ended up being one of the best decisions that completely changed the direction of my career. So let me explain. During that year, I was studying in the UK. I was able to build a foundation in business that I simply didn't have before. Coming from medicine, things like strategy, marketing, and business models, and how companies actually grow were all new concepts to me. That degree gave me a framework to start understanding this world. But I think most importantly, it opened a lot of doors to opportunities that I didn't know existed. So while I was studying, I started to work with a lot of health tech startups, helping them with things like medical writing, marketing, and communications. And lucky enough, that eventually led me to the role that I'm working in today. So in that sense, the degree really did act as a bridge between clinical medicine and the business side of healthcare. And I think one of the biggest factors that did help a lot, and something that many international students will care about, was that I was able to get the UK graduate visa. So what this meant was, when I finished my master's, I was able to stay in the UK for another 2 years without needing immediate work visa sponsorship. And that visa really did make a huge difference for me, because it gave me the time to explore opportunities, work in startups, and build experience in a new industry without the pressure of needing a company to sponsor me right away. So between the degree itself, the startup experience, and the visa flexibility, the transition into a new career became that much easier and realistic. However, that being said, there were also a few things that I would probably do differently if I was making the same decision again. So firstly, Loughborough University was an incredible place to study, especially from a sporting experience. The facilities were world class, the badminton training environment was amazing, and I built a lot of friendships and experiences that I'll probably carry with me for the rest of my life. But if I was thinking about it from a pure careers and academics point of view, I probably would have chosen a different university. I would have considered schools like London Business School or London School of Economics, because they have a much stronger network and they're located right in the center of London in that business ecosystem. And the academics and being in that environment would have made networking, internships, and the overall job opportunities a lot easier. So while the Master's in Management absolutely helped me pivot my career. The university and location you choose can really make a big difference to the opportunities that you're gonna have. And I just want to make one final note here that the route that I took is very uncommon for doctors to do a master's in management. Most doctors who move away from clinical work either pursue something like a master's in public health, or they might do a master's in data science, or later in their career they might even do an MBA. The master's in management isn't the typical route, but I will say in my case it worked really well because I was still very early in my career, and it gave me a really good introduction to the business world. And ultimately, this degree was the thing that really helped to open the most doors for the opportunities that came after. So looking back now, doing a master's in management ended up being the turning point that allowed me to move away from clinical medicine and into the business side of healthcare. It wasn't something that many doctors around me, or any doctors really at the time, were doing. And honestly, I wasn't even completely sure how it would have worked out when I first made that decision. But that degree ended up giving me the space to explore a different world, build really good business skills, and start working in the health tech space. And over time, that experience eventually led me to the career I have today. Now, of course, everyone's situation is different, and a master's in management isn't necessarily the right path for every doctor or any professional thinking about a career change. But if you're early in your career and you're looking for a way to bridge into the business world, it can be quite an interesting option. So if you're interested in career pivots like this, I've made another video explaining how I actually got my first marketing job as a doctor, which goes much deeper into the transition after the degree. And if you want to see more content about career transitions and non-traditional paths like this, consider subscribing. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.